Going to introduce our speaker. Tonight's speaker was here in January, and he had so much to say, and we decided not to complete it because we would have run way over. So Dr. Michael Mantz is going to do part 2 of his presentation today. Let me just refresh your memories for those of you who were or weren't here. In January, Dr. Mantz discussed the latest science on what goes into creating a strong brain, mind, and nervous system, as well as recent scientific evidence that demonstrates that what we eat, how we sleep, who we connect with, how we feel, and how we move our bodies determines our mental well-being. Tonight, in part 2, Dr. Mantz will focus his remarks on how to work with negative thoughts and difficult emotions. And he'll talk about some tools to empower us to be able to build a stronger brain and sharper mind. I'd like to just review some of Dr. Mantz's background. He received his medical training at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine and later joined the psychiatry residency program at UC Irvine. Before opening his own practice, he worked at the VA Long Beach Healthcare System and the Alcohol, Drug, and Mental Health Services in Santa Barbara. He moved to the Bay Area last summer and has been building his practice here. Please join me in welcoming Michael Mantz.
Thank you, Beverly, by the way. I appreciate the introduction. So I'm Dr. Michael Mantz. I'm an integrative psychiatrist, as Beverly, to let you know. And I'm passionate about integrative psychiatry. It's something that moves me a lot. While I was in training, I became very much disenfranchised with the results that we get from standard psychiatric care. I mean, sometimes we get some really good results, and I'm not anti-medications, but I think the only focus on medications is really limiting ourselves. And when I started to really look into the literature and the science behind what goes into building a stronger mind, what goes into building a stronger brain, what goes into building a stronger body, because we're all interconnected, I was amazed by what we weren't taught in medical school, what we weren't taught during our residency. So I went and sought out extra training because I was just dissatisfied with the results that we get. And we now know, when we look at studies, for instance, the most popular medication in the United States, do you know what class of medications are the most popular? What? Well, that's a larger class, but antidepressants. 1 in 10 people are on an antidepressant right now. Do you know the success rate after 12 months? After 12 months, if you put a person on an antidepressant and then it didn't work, and then you put them on another one and it didn't work, and whatever, but maybe some people did, if you started off with like 1,000 people and you kept treating that way, for 12 months where a person would be on a medication, it would put them in remission, meaning no longer having depressive symptoms, and it would last for 12 months. What do you think the success rate is with our current level of antidepressants right now? Huh? Okay, it's about 20%. Yeah, it's roughly about 20%. I'm sorry? Yeah, so, we have the most popular drug in the world. 1 in 10 of us are taking it. What other thing would we ever purchase if it worked only in 1 in 10 people for a year, that we would this would be the most popular, most profitable drugs that we have? It shows how desperate we are to work through these problems, but we're not given root cause solutions. And so that's exactly what I try to learn about, engender in my practice. It does take a little more time and effort. It's not as easy as taking, a pill and that's it. But sometimes we use combinations of medications and supplements and nutrition and exercise, looking at all the different factors that go into making a strong brain. And that's what motivates me. And I'm actually growing my business a little bit more away from one-on-one. That's going to still be there because I love doing that kind of work. But I'm going to be launching a new website, drmantz.com, in about 2 months, because I feel really moved to that there's not enough psychiatrists out here that have that type of view. And I know a lot of you have either had loved ones or yourself and gone to certain psychiatrists, and there are many great ones out there, but there are also a lot of ones that are substandard as well. And I want to promote this message that there is the information, there is the science available to create a stronger brain by using and integrating as many of these new treatment modalities that have been on the horizon. That actually, some of them have been out for 10, 20, or even 30 years, but we're just not taught. So all the material provided in this lecture is provided for, this is sort of my CYA slide, so I just have to go through. Information and educational purposes only. Consult a physician regarding the applicability of any opinions and recommendations with respect to something, yada, yada, yada. Okay, you got it. So this was a full presentation, but I tend to like to teach. That's my inner teacher comes out, and I really want you to take something away from here. I will feel like I've done my job if you can take 2 things away from here that are practical, that can change your day, that can then change if you do consistently, that can possibly change the health of your brain and your life. So that's what I'm hoping to accomplish here, and I hope that at the end of this, that all of you feel that way at the end of this. That is my goal during this presentation. So I have to kind of go through all this, but I have a kind of a slightly summation at the end. So for those of you who weren't here the first time, I can give you kind of like the basic gist. How many people were here the first time? Show of hands. Oh, great. Wonderful. So what we're basically going over are 9 foundational principles that I've kind of come up with over the past 6 years working with clients. In fact, it's been about 20 years because I'm talking about 6 years in private practice, but also when I worked for the ACT team in Santa Barbara, working with the most severely persistent mentally ill, working in the VA, working with a lot of, I worked with a lot of PTSD. And then in my private practice, I tend to work more with anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, and addiction seem to be most. I have a couple clients with psychosis as well, just not as much as, say, when I was working at the ACT clinic, which that was like predominantly psychosis. So the idea is this: what creates brain and mind health? So the general idea is that we were taught this kind of idea, and I know most of you have this idea in your head because it's been publicized, is that our brain chemistry is off. We have a chemical imbalance. How many people have heard this? Chemical imbalance theory. Yes. There's not that much evidence that proves that. That was mainly a kind of a marketing kind of maneuver to kind of make you think, to get you to maybe be more apt to buy these medications. I'll give you an example. What we were talking about with antidepressants. Antidepressants, when you take an antidepressant, Prozac, Zoloft, citalopram, any of those Paxil, all those antidepressants, on day 1, when you take that medication, your serotonin levels rise. They go up. But why don't you feel better? Typically, patients won't feel any differences. They'll get some side effects usually, but typically, if it's going to work for them, it'll take at least 10 to 14 days before they start noticing certain improvements. They won't actually exhibit full benefits till like 3 to 6 weeks. So if their serotonin is rising on day 1, why aren't they experiencing the benefits on day 1? Why aren't they feeling? Why does it take 3 to 6 weeks? The reason is because now they're starting to figure out is that when we raise the serotonin levels in that way, there's changes in the brain structure. The brain starts to actually, new neurons start to grow in critical areas of the brain called the hippocampus, which actually boosts mood, which improves memory. Because one of the things when people get depressed, they talk about, I can't remember things. Things are on the tip of my tongue, and I just can't get them out. And you feel slow. Your mentation is slow. When the hippocampus grows, that will start to get better. So that's what we start to see. You're literally growing new neurons. There's new connections being made in the brain. There are new growth factors in the brain. This points to one of the more fundamental things that we're growing now. It's called neuroplasticity. And briefly, because I went over this in the past, neuroplasticity is how your brain, the structure of your brain, literally changes according to the environment that it's in. It's changing right now. Your brain, as you listen to me, if you're putting your attention on me, and it's making sense, and it's having an effect on your system. If you're somewhere else, it's not going to have much. But if you're doing that, it's literally lighting up those parts of your brain. And if it's something that you find valuable, a new connection will start to grow. And when you go to bed tonight, that connection will get larger and larger. And if you repeat that, if you look it over, if you write it down, if you repeat it, that connection will actually grow together, and new neurons can connect together. The neurons can create new connections. Old connections can go away. In certain key areas, new neurons can grow. In other areas, the neurons will be pruned away, hopefully those in which our unhealthy habits come from. So when we're really looking to help the brain get healthier and strong, the chemical imbalance is like the low. It's like when you're looking at a tree, it's like we're looking at the leaves, and the leaves are problematic. So instead of addressing the branches, the roots, and the trunk, we're just going to address the tree, the leaves, and we're just going to change them around and come up with different ways to kind of keep the leaves looking a little bit like green. We'll spray them, we'll do all kinds of things, but we won't actually address the tree itself. That's kind of like the chemical imbalance. It will have an effect, it will do something, but most of the effects are actually because it's starting to affect the tree itself. So what we want to do is we now know through science specific ways to enhance this effect in your brain. And we also know in science that disorders like schizophrenia, disorders like bipolar, disorders like really intense depression, people have less, in general, growth factors in their brain than the normal population. So when we are coming up with stress, when we hit a lot of stress, when we're challenged in our daily life, our brain needs to adapt to that. It needs to change and adapt and learn. That's what the brain does. But those people who are susceptible to that, if the stress becomes too overwhelming, it can't keep up. It cannot adapt. So one of the key strategies that change the way I treat major depression, way I treat schizophrenia or psychosis or bipolar, is by focusing on enhancing neuroplasticity. Because by doing so, you have the opportunity to supercharge your brain to be able to grow in ways that are healthy, prune the areas that are no longer healthy, that will wither away, and also adapt. So grow, rewire, prune, adapt. So what we do is we put it in certain situations. For instance, enhancing sleep quality, exercise. These things are some of the most profound influences on our brain's neuroplasticity. There are certain nutrients that I went over, certain supplements. So those things will stimulate it. Now, think about it. How many people have ever worked out in the gym at all? Lift weights? Anybody? Okay, great. So when you go out and work out in the gym, and then what you do is you want to eat the best food right afterwards. You've broken down your muscles. Now you want to rebuilding your muscles. You want to give it the best raw materials. You don't want to give it shoddy materials. If you're going to remodel your kitchen or your bathroom, and you want to have the best bathroom and kitchen possible, if you're going to pick shoddy materials, even if you have the best craftsmen, the results are going to be subpar. So what we do is we know how to do is stimulate the neuroplasticity. It gets the brain ready to grow, rewire, and adapt. And then we give it the best raw materials. So we look at nutrition. What are the best foods for the brain? And I went over that a little bit. We can talk about that. I'm going to give time after this lecture, by the way, and as much time until they kick my butt out. So if anybody wants to ask me questions afterwards, I'm here. My ongoing, no matter what my career goes to, is always stay connected to NAMI, to come back to roots, to contribute, to give back. Because really, I think the people who are served by this are probably the least served, with the quality of care. And I want to give back, and I want to help out as much as possible. So this is like one of my ways of trying to help people in this wonderful organization. So we give your brain the best raw materials. Now your brain is supercharged. It's ready. You gave it the best raw materials, so now it's able to create like these brand new structures. Now it's primed too for all those new healthy habits. Now you can add it to. Now, do some of us try new healthy habits and have difficulty maintaining them? Right. That's true. And I had that problem too. But when you combine these together, the habits happen quicker. Because your brain is growing faster. In order for something to become a habit, you need to literally create new connections in the brain. But if you're not eating the foods that stimulate the brain or give it the best raw materials, if you're not doing the behaviors that we know that does that, well, then it's going to be very slow. It's going to be very frustrating. And it's going to be very difficult to create a very healthy brain. So that's basically the kind of overview. Stimulate neuroplasticity. Give your brain the best raw materials. And now you have an arena, a beautiful practice ground to practice your healthy habits, and they'll be easier to incorporate. And then that also makes your brain powerful, more strong, and helps it grow. It creates a positive feedback loop. It's kind of like compound interest. Just keep putting it in, it gets bigger, keep going in, it goes up, 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 up. Start today. All right. So we went into the biological interventions in the past, like the raw materials, the food, the nutrients, the supplements, those kind of things. Now we're going to go into some of the psychological areas, some of the arenas. And what I wanted to do here was to give a little bit of a kind of an overview. It's hard to kind of go in any depth in any of these subjects, but just to give you an overview, because I feel that there's a lot of confusion in psychology and the psychological parts of our mind. And I really would like to give you guys a taste of some of what science and ancient healing traditions have shown, the best of that information, putting it together to try to teach you a little about some of the common areas where we get stuck with that kind of creates a lot of suffering in our lives. And those areas are thoughts and emotions. These tend to cause us a lot of problems. And so let's go into, learning to respond to your thoughts and emotions with skill and with wisdom. Easier said than done. So psychological strategies, thinking. So what are thoughts? I mean, there's many ways to define them. People will come back. But in general, they're symbols that your mind's creating. They're symbols, and they generally come in two forms. And some people separate these out, but I'm going to put them together for simplicity's sake. They usually come in either auditory form. You get the little voice in your head telling you things. What am I going to have for dinner tonight? How long is this guy going to keep talking? I'm not sure. What is he talking about? Those kind of things. That's one form. The other one are these images that kind of go in your head. Every now and then you get a little image. You get an image maybe of yourself. Maybe an image of something what you're going to do tomorrow. Maybe you'll get both together, where these little movies kind of, and if it's a movie about the past, we call those memories. And if it's a movie about the future, we call those fantasies. So that's how the thought process goes. The interesting thing is, what I'd like you to do is, instead of, I don't want to lecture too much, I'd like to give experiential exercises for everybody so that we can not just hear it and cognitively, I want you to be kind of an active participant. So what I'd like you to do is just sit upright in your position, and we're going to do a couple of these. And what I'd like you to do, what we're going to do, and I'm going to give you, is you're going to learn how to just watch and listen to your own mind. That's all we're going to do. I know for some of us it could be because we have a lot of thoughts going on in there. So what I want you to do is find a concrete, whether it's something you're holding on to, or just sensing your butt in the chair, or sensing your feet down on the ground, anything to anchor you. What we're going to do is, and then once you find a place that feels sturdy, that feels like it will remind me where I'm at. Because what happens is, we get lost in our thoughts. Our attention goes into the thoughts. So what we want to do is, we don't want to go and ride the thought wave. We want to look at our thoughts, not from them. That's the idea. So, and we want to get an idea whether they're primarily auditory, whether they're primary images, and we're going to just look at our minds. So go ahead and close your eyes, and first put your attention where you decided to anchor yourself. It could be where your hands are holding on, where your feet are on the ground, whether it's your butt in the chair, and just sense that area first. That will give you some grounding. Once you feel that you've grounded yourself, I want you to just open your mind and just observe it and listen to it. And don't do anything else. If you get caught into a thought stream, just notice that. Feel the concrete thing again to remind you where you are, not running around in fantasy land. And then continue to look at your thoughts. And I'm going to ask you a couple questions as you do that. First, notice what form are they coming in? Are they mostly a voice? Are they mostly auditory? Do you see images of words, or just images of pictures? Do you notice that for some of you, when I mention those things, it triggers that response in your brain? Notice how fast your thoughts are going. Do they come in slowly and then go away real fast? Or they kind of blip in and out? Do you notice some come in fast and some kind of linger a little slower? So we're not looking at the content of the thought, but we're looking at thoughts themselves and how they behave. Do one thought come right after the other? Or is there a space between the thoughts that you're having that you notice? Now, without opening your eyes, I'd like the people, with a show of hands, I want you to first now start to look and pay attention to how you feel when there's a gap between thoughts. Don't try to create your thoughts. Don't try to change them. Don't try to manipulate. All I want you to do is pay attention when there's a gap between two thoughts and what that's like. That's it. And I just want to show people who are conscious of when they have gaps in their head when they're doing this exercise. Okay. All right. And while you see any of those gaps, no matter how short, just notice how you feel. And then we can open our eyes. So I'm welcome anybody, people who have never done these kind of things before, anybody interested, want to report what they found, what they discovered. Was there something interesting that you never noticed before? Anybody at all would like to participate? You felt relaxed. A very calm feeling going through the body. Yeah. So oftentimes when we go inside, when we direct our attention inwardly rather than externally, that generally brings out a feeling of relaxation. I'll explain that why later on. Anything else?
Just trying to work with the meditation. That seems to be a similar thing.
Mm-hmm.
It works.
Mm-hmm.
When I succeeded in doing that, I could eliminate everything else.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Dead space.
So when you have the dead space, when there's no thoughts,
Nothing.
what do you feel inside? What do you feel in your body? Does it feel good? Does it feel bad?
Good.
Feels good. Okay. Are you present there when you have no thoughts? Do you disappear? Yes. Okay. So one of the go ahead. Yes. That's right. So that happens too. So oftentimes when we're thinking a lot and we try to stop them, what happens? It gets frustrating. I say good luck with that when you're trying to stop your own thoughts. It's like trying to stop a ripples in water with your hand and try to stop it. The more you do it, the more you're just going to aggravate the water. You can't stop your thoughts. Even people who can for a while, the studies show that they come back with a vengeance afterwards. So thought stopping is not the way to work with thoughts. But it's true. So when we're open and letting ourselves have the thoughts rather than trying to control the mind, sometimes we notice our mind gets quiet that way. It's like you gave it the space it finally wanted. It's interesting. It's like that's almost paradoxical. Go ahead. That's auditory. So you think in picture, you see the picture of the word. You don't actually hear someone saying the word. You don't hear your own voice. Exactly. So does that come out as a string of text in your vision, or does it come out as you hear like almost like a faint phantom voice in your and saying, "I got to get up tomorrow for coffee."
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like talking to myself.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Auditory.
Rather than seeing a page or a book that says you got to get up early.
Exactly. So that is what I'm meaning by auditory.
People think that way with the acting.
They do. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, right? Yeah. Yeah, there are some people like that. So what I wanted to point out, one of the things that we have a problem with is that we've been taught by our culture is that, first of all, how many of us noticed that our minds were very active during that time period? You had a lot of thoughts, and it was actually hard to keep track of even watching them. And that's what most of us experience. And what in like thousands of years ago, when in Buddhism or all these other kind of contemplative traditions we found, they used to call it the monkey mind. Chatter, 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 chatter. Constant chatter. And I'll get back because I want to make sure I speed up, and then we'll get back to that. And so that constant chatter is, and then we try to fight the chatter. We try to distract ourselves from the chatter, and we try to do anything we want, but that's what generally makes the chatter actually get worse. And so what happens is we also notice that the mind is just making thoughts. You're not doing anything with it. You're not sitting there like, all right, let me think about this one, think about... Now, there's sometimes I can tell you, all right, why don't you think about this, or I'm going to think about vacation. But what started you to first start thinking about for vacation? What started you in that process? those processes are happening unconsciously. They're happening behind the scenes. Most of the thoughts that are being generated, if not all, you're not in control of. They just happen. But the thing is, let's say we have a thought that's quote unquote bad thought, or more, then we get scared. We think there's something wrong with us, or maybe there's something, and then that starts to create all kinds of neurosis because you're in this conflict, because now I have to try to control what I can't control. And that's generally what happens with a lot of obsessive people. People who have obsessive compulsive disorder. They try to control because they have a certain thought that may be morally not, what they would consider morally bad. And then they try to stop thinking that, which then makes them think about it more. And those kind of things. So the idea is that don't try to stop your thoughts. Let them be. Because they don't have any power over you unless there's two things. You give it your attention and you believe in it. If you don't give it your attention and you don't believe in them, they have no power. They have no power over you. And they're actually supposed to be your friends. They're supposed to be, in an ideal solution, our idea to create symbols has helped us to create everything in this room. Everything you see in this room was once a thought in someone's head. The clothes that you're wearing, the glasses that you have, the hat that you have, the camera that's taking this film here, the projector, the food that was cultivated, all was once a thought. That's the power of thinking when it's functional. But oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes it's just chatter, chatter, chatter. So your job is to be quality control manager. You're not going to stop them, but you have the capacity to see, when you're dealing with certain, say, negative thought patterns that may be arising in your head, is you can ask yourself. So some people, they deal with cognitive behavioral therapy. They write down their thoughts and then they ask, is that true or is it not true? And generally I find when we try to go into the truth, whether the thought is true or not true, we get into people who are like, yeah, but it is true. I just know it is. So that doesn't really, I don't find it as helpful as the question is this helpful? Because in essence, the thoughts were made to help us survive. And so the better question to ask where thought comes into your lap, maybe it's a common one you recognize, is this a helpful thought? When I think this thought, when I believe this thought, what do I do? Do I do things that are helpful? Do I do things that bring me vitality? Do things that bring connection and love in my life? Or do they bring fear, anger, irritation? Do they make me feel lonely? Do they make me feel disconnected? Do I put myself down, and what does that do for me? So you start to see it. We can look at it from a very practical view. And that's why I really love this question, is what are the helpful thoughts? And so when you recognize it's not helpful, then we learn to direct our attention away from it and direct this, and you can then start asking a question, which we'll get to on the bottom here, is asking, which on the next slide is then you can ask, what would be a more helpful thought here? And you just drop the question into your brain. And your brain will figure out the answer if you trust it a little bit. It just has a little time. It's a practice that you start to do. You can literally start to rewire your brain's thinking patterns this way. One thing I want to talk about is called the default mode network. It's one of the things that has come out in the recent neuroscientific literature. And the default mode network is when we're not paying attention to the present moment, when our mind is wandering, when we're daydreaming. And we find that almost all of us are almost doing this all the time. It's very rare we're actually in the moment, present, and on task on hand. And we find that when we're mind wandering a lot, people who mind wander more than others generally are more prone to have lower mood states. One of the reasons why that is because this default mode network, you can kind of think about it. You remember in the time, we don't really use it this way anymore, but remember when we used to have computers and then the screensaver would pop up to try to help keep the screen okay? So it's like after a while of inactivity, this screensaver will kind of pop up on the computer screen, and there'll be certain images and maybe sound, maybe music would play. It's kind of like what the brain does. You're not on task any hand, and all of a sudden your brain's screensaver pops up, and we call this screensaver the default mode network, and it has certain characteristics, certain things that it does. Two of the things that it does is oftentimes it thinks about you, what you've done, how you are, evaluates you, sees what you should have done, what you shouldn't have done, those kind of thoughts. It also has a negativity bias. Why? Because it was built around survival. When we were really in living it out, where survival was a day-to-day kind of thing, if we missed a mate, potential mate, if we missed a potential food source or a potential friend, we would probably live the next day. But if we missed the markings or the smell of a saber-toothed tiger that was there, we're toast. So our brain because after a while, those people who just leaned on the side that this possibly could be really dangerous, and so I'm going to just expect the worst and maybe hope for the best kind of thing, they lived longer. And we are the inheritance of those brains. So now we have a negativity bias. The problem is we're no longer in those kind of situations most of the time, hopefully most of us. And yet we have this negativity bias, and we're distracted all the time. We're not in nature anymore. We're not engaged anymore. So we have all this, their default mode networks are going crazy. So we have all these thoughts of ourself and a negativity bias. Can you see what this creates over time? Thinking about me and a negativity bias. Thinking about me, negativity bias. Negative thoughts about me. And then we have everything to compare ourselves to with social media, everything else like that. Everyone's putting up their best face forward. So our comparator comes out, and we either, at times, we'll feel like we're on the higher end, but most of the time, we feel like we're on the short end of the stick. And even if we do feel like we're on the higher end, we're worried that we're going to lose that advantage, and so we have to push ourselves. So we're never really fully comfortable. And this is one of the issues with, and with the default mode network, and why being mindful, and what we talked about in our last lecture, can be extremely helpful, because we know when people who are mindful practitioners, this network calms down. And so we get great. And one of the reasons why they propose why we get, we're just more calmer, less negativity, better moods, those kind of things. Question I want to ask: most of us, when we think about how you think right now. How many times do you think your thoughts are about the past? And how many times is your mind thinking about the future? And I'd like you to just think about that for a second. And show of hands, predominantly, and we're not talking about the present right now, how many of you have more thoughts going into the past than there is the future? That would be more past than the future. Okay, great. And opposite, more future than past. Okay. So just so that you understand, so past is rumination. So people have this more past orientation are more likely to look at things and find out regrets potentially, or I should have done that better, or how can I do that better? And I can look at it and think about it, hoping for a better past. If I just keep thinking about it, I'm going to change my past. I'm going to somehow figure it out. We call that rumination. It's one of the main psychological factors that's a risk factor for depression. The opposite, future-oriented people. People think about things. What's going to happen? What's going to happen to me? Again, oftentimes, fear. Am I going to lose whatever I've gained? Or desire. Am I going to get something? I got to get it. But what generally happens is that there is a risk factor for those of us who think predominantly in the future, and that is anxiety. So we see that it generates worry. What's going to happen? There's always uncertainty. It's inherent in reality. So those of us who have a future orientation are more predisposed to have anxiety disorders. Those of us who have a more past orientation have rumination, are more prone to depression. And so this is something helpful to know when I start to look at patients, what to focus on. Yes? That means you're enlightened and you don't even have to listen anymore and you can leave it. No, I know. I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's just a matter of just knowing that, is that you probably don't have as much. They don't have any studies whether that would be you're less prone to get either or because you have a kind of a balance. I'm not sure, but I do know that if you have a one leaning towards one way, there's an extra probability that you might be prone to that particular type. Doesn't mean you're going to. I'm just giving that's the tendencies that we see. So one of the things that's really, and it's a key for thinking and when we go into emotions, is using your body as an anchor, just like we did in the beginning. So what I want to do is I just want to go quickly, because I noticed I went a little long on that last slide, to teach a little bit about the 4 anchors, which we know from science are a little bit easier for us, even for those who have difficulty sensing our bodies, because we're usually big thinkers, have difficulty with that, a lot of analysis. Hard to feel grounded in the body. But these 4 body parts generally tend to you're able to feel them a little bit better. How are people with standing up? Okay with that? Yeah. Let me stand up. Okay. I just find it a little bit better in the middle so we don't get too sleepy. What I want you to do is put your hands out like this. And I'd like you to close your eyes. And I'd like you to put your attention in your dominant hand, whether that's your right hand or your left, and just sense and feel your dominant hand with your attention. Notice the palm of your hand, the back of your hand, and your fingers. Now switch your attention to your non-dominant hand. Notice what that feels like when you switch it. Again, the palm, the back, fingers. Now feel both your hands simultaneously. Notice what that feels like when your attention goes in the body. Notice what happens to thinking when you're able to sense your hands. And then keep your hands. Let your hands be anchors to ground your attention so they don't get so seduced by every thought that jumps into your head. And if your arms are starting to get a little bit tired, you can kind of slowly bring them closer to your body. And what I'd like you to do is bring your attention to the base of your spine. And just sense the base of your spine. Notice that part of our body where we sit down on that has that kind of stability, core. Then let your attention shift through your body and notice the base of your belly. In traditional Chinese medicine, they would call this your dantian. It's the center of gravity of your body, and it was felt to have the center core of your qi energy there. So generally it's felt as a sense of stability when we do this. And then finally, let your attention slide down your legs and let it fall down into your feet. Feel your heels, the arches, the toes. Feel the ground, how it supports your feet and pushes up. Feel the connection that gravity allows your feet to touch the ground and the ground to push up and greet your feet. Feel that stability that the ground provides, the earth beneath you. And then you can just bring this to a close. Now, for those of us who may have a little more difficulty sensing, and those 4 body parts are great areas to start to build something called interoception, or internal perception, our ability to sense our body. And we found in science that doing that balances out our nervous system, gets to a more calm state, improves empathy. We're able to sense not only ourselves more accurately, but we're able to sense others more accurately. You guys can sit down if you want. At the heart of building your interoception is the heart of building your emotional intelligence, and you being able to tell what's going on inside of you, and what you get better at also telling what's going on with who you're around with. It's one of the most important skills that you can teach yourself. And so there are many ways to build that, and I'll get into that. But one of the things that can be happening when we're having these troublesome thoughts, those ones that just keep bothering us, they keep hitting us, you're not good enough, or I'm an idiot, or, whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of negative thoughts that we have. And there are what we call diffusion techniques, because most of those thoughts are the ones that we call beliefs, which are thoughts that are wrapped around sensations and emotions, where it feels like whenever you feel a sensation and you have a thought that makes sense with that sensation, our body considers that truth. It's not, but that's how our brain determines truth. If those two are resonating with each other, you'll feel like that's true. If you feel negative inside and you think I am a bad person, and you feel negative, you're going to say I am bad rather than I am feeling bad. You're going to identify yourself with it. So it's really helpful to start to be able to sense your body accurately, so then we can start to kind of decouple the thoughts that are around the sensations that are being driven. We'll get into that. But one of the best techniques that I have done, and it's so simple, but it's so hard for some people just to do, there's just a lack of motivation, is that when you have negative thoughts, write them down. It's one of the most powerful things you can do. It's very simple. Write them down. What you do, if you keep writing them down again and again, and you look at them, you ask them, is this helpful? You have to ask whether it's true or not. Throw that off the table. That's not even helpful. Who cares? I want to know if it's helpful. Your thoughts are meant to be practical. They're meant to be functional. They're meant to make your life easier, not harder. So you train it by not squashing it, not trying to disturb that water, ripples of water. But you notice the ones that are not helpful and you ignore them. And you go to the ones and you ask, what is the helpful? You can change, but ways to kind of just loosen it up. And again, is that you can change the speed of that inner voice. So if you're having a thought like, I'm an idiot, you can speed it up. You can be like, I'm an idiot, I'm an idiot, I'm an idiot. You can, like, as if you had the old record player, and you kind of, or you can slow it down. And that will get usually some laughter, which is a part of us starting to not take the thought so seriously. When I work with clients and I get that laughter, I know we're starting to unglue the thought from their identity. And you can do other things. You can get creative. You can change the voice to a cartoon character. Something like that. Or what I like to do is when there's a thought that I don't want them to, that's like a negative belief, I like, who is someone that when you hear them talk, you're like, they're full of crap. Change it to that person's voice. Turn your inner critic to that voice. So that when you hear that, you'll be like, that's full of crap. And it'll help to start to separate out. I know there's some laughter here. Hopefully it's not my voice. And then, as you said, channel your inner guru. So when I'm trying to teach my clients, I don't want clients who are going to be with me for 5, 6, 7 years. I want a client I want them to learn the tools and then not need me anymore. I consider that the greatest success. They become independent and they can do it. If they need me when they're in stress, great. But I want them to learn how to do this. So ask helpful questions. So when you're constantly finding yourself in situations, you're like, how the heck am I always finding myself in these situations like this? What we generally do is ask the question, why? And the why doesn't really help us very much in that situation. When we're in negative states, why doesn't work? Why? The reason is when we're in negative states, our mind is now, it's like you opened up the negative state app in your brain. It's like a date, and you're going to enter a question in there. For instance, let's say you're struggling with eating food late at night, and now you just ate some ice cream. Like, oh, why did I eat ice cream right now? I knew I wasn't going to eat. I told myself, but I did. Now you're in a negative state. You're upset at yourself, and you ask the question, why? Voice is going to answer. It's because you're a fat pig. It's going to say something derogatory. It's going to say something why? Because you're in a negative state. It's not going to give you a good answer. It's going to give you something that's going to make you feel less, and you're never going to get better. Oh, forget about it. Just go continue to eat. Who cares? So we don't ask why. We ask how and what. How did this happen? You become more practical. It's like you're a scientist. You're figuring out the patterns that are leading you to unhealthy patterns. Well, what happened? Well, what was going on? Well, I had a fight with my boss, so I was a little bit angry. Then I came home, and then my spouse wasn't really listening to me, so then I felt really lonely. And so then when I got lonely, and I was going in there, and I tried to watch TV, but then I was like, and then I went in. So now you start seeing that. Now you write that down, and then you wind up doing it again, and you start noticing triggers. Anger, loneliness, eating ice cream, anger, loneliness, eating ice cream. Much more helpful than calling yourself a fat pig or saying that you can't do it. And then you can say, how do I work with these emotions in a way that's helpful than in a way that's just smothering it through food? And that's kind of the general process that we go through. And we start to teach our brain how to do it. So we're going to go into emotions. I do talk a lot. Wow, I'm noticing. That's what my mom always said that anyway. The basics. One of the things that's really helpful, in our culture, we disparage emotions. We quash them. We're in an overly yang, masculinized society that says that emotions they're not part of the rational brain. Actually, when people lose their emotional center, there's this judge that actually had an injury to their emotional center. And you think then they would become like the best judge ever. They'd be so objective. They have no emotions, and they're making all kinds of errors. All kinds of errors. We need our emotions. In fact, the word emote means to move. When we don't have emotions, and I think maybe a couple of you may have either people you know or relatives that have what we call the negative symptoms in schizophrenia. And then negative symptoms in schizophrenia is when you have very little emotion. we call flat affects. And we have what's called anhedonia. And without hedonia, pleasure. The inability to experience pleasure. When we don't have those abilities, how active are people with negative symptoms? How decisive are they? Can they make decisions? How hard is it to get themselves up throughout the day? These things are very difficult. So the emotions are extraordinarily beneficial. It's just a way to use them intelligently. And we don't, and because we have this kind of culture that suppresses, like, don't cry, big girls don't cry, men don't cry, all this kind of stuff. That's why I have a job. We didn't have that. If we actually knew how to work with emotions, if we learned how to work with them, there would be a lot less need for people like me. So they come as a package deal. You can't selectively suppress certain uncomfortable emotions and hope you get all the good ones. I just want the happiness and the love and the connection, but I don't want any of the sadness or the anger. When that happens, I'm just going to watch TV or drink some beer or whatever it might be that I do, or distraction. Just think about how much we use distraction. Our whole entire, almost all the things we have in our entertainment system, the movies we watch, the apps that we play, the websites that we go on, distraction. With this kind of subtle discomfort that's growing in our bodies as we age. This kind of chronic dis-ease that's going on. So one of the first things is to teach people is how to name their emotions. If we name their emotions, many people are getting these sensations. What's going on? I don't know. And then, because a lot of people I recognize don't even know when they're feeling anxious sometimes. And then they finally, after a while, we're able to kind of piece it's anxiety. When we label something, it allows the brain, and I won't go into too much of it, but allows the brain to calm down some of the reactive centers of the brain. So when we label it, we feel a little better. It's like that, remember, some of us who have these conditions, and some of us are like, I wish I had the blood work and I didn't find anything. I wish I just knew. Even if it was something bad, I just want to know. Just to have the label can be very comforting to a lot of people. So getting to know your basic emotions like anger, sadness. A lot of us who are very analytical have difficulty labeling them. So that's one of the things. And we recondition to value them. That's one of our works, is that we don't judge people when they cry. We don't get afraid. We're not scared when that happens. Like good therapists are interested when that happens, are present. And that creates what we call an emotional corrective experience, because a lot of times people don't know how to handle when people are very in emotional states. When people are angry and it's not being reflected back with anger, that too is helpful. It's one of the ways we work with it. And I love this line. I use it a lot, because especially for the macho type of man, and that is, how could it be courageous to be afraid to feel your emotions? That's what it comes down to, where there is fear. I don't want to show it. It's embarrassing. It's not strong. It's weak if I have these emotions. Well, actually, that's fear. That's avoidance. How could you be courageous to be afraid to feel your emotions? All right. Emotional intelligence, the anatomy of an emotion. There's more to it, but I'm going to simplify it so that you guys be very easy. What do we get when we get? Let's say, let's go with a regular emotion that I want to just pick out here. I don't know. Let's just say sad. Let's say anger. Anger is a good one. A lot of us get angry, get irritated. The different spectrums, by the way. So there's irritation, there's anger, and there's rage. So there's one thing is to know that emotions lie on a spectrum. We get body sensations. Your heart rate starts to rise. Your breathing gets stronger. You feel heat in your body. There's a rising sensation in the body. And all that stuff. These are the body sensations of anger. It's mobilizing you. It wants you to go in and destroy. Anger comes up mainly because someone's blocking you or something. It's blocking you from something that you really want. And something's in your way that angers you. Then we have our predictions and interpretations that are part of it. So the thoughts that accompany the emotions. The sensations that come up. So the thought, I have these feelings, and I'm like that. All the colorful words that we can go, he's doing this and that, and whatever it might be. We start telling ourselves a story, blaming, resenting, all the different things. And we tell these stories, and we make certain predictions. This person's never going to do. They're always going to be like this, and then and I'm always going to be like whatever stories we're telling ourselves. That's also part of the emotional experience. And then we have an impulse. So in the sense of anger, it's usually to go towards. I'm angry. I want to handle this situation, whether physically or just with my words. A lot of times we get mixed emotions, so we'll get anger but fear. Because oftentimes when we had anger when we were kids, we got hit. So then we have the anger, and then we also have anxiety around it. So instead of having just this energy of expansion, you will have the energy of expansion, but you also have all these contractions in your body, as we were conditioned when we had anger experiences earlier in our life. And then, so you might have a kind of confused impulse, like you're angry, I want to go, but then I take a step back. But in true anger, it's an approach. With fear, we retreat. So we can kind of break down the different anatomy. So oftentimes the difficulty of emotions is that they can be so overwhelming, so difficult to work with. They almost take over our whole experience. It even changes the way we look at the world. When we're sad, literally the world looks dim. It looks more, especially those of us who have depression. So what we want to do is we want to focus on body sensations when we're working with emotions. That's what we want to simplify the experience for your brain so it can process it. What happens whenever you take on something that's over? When I hear people who have a lot of emotions and are having difficulty with it, what do they say? I feel overwhelmed. So if you're overwhelmed with anything, you're overwhelmed with a task at work, you're overwhelmed with something at home, what do? Break it down into simple steps and take it one step at a time. So I'm suggesting here, and what I've been able to do, and a lot of people have suggested to do, is we focus on the body sensation, because that's where all the energy is in an emotion. The energy is in the body. You can feel it. You can feel it when you're in your anger. You can feel the heat. You can feel the rising. You can feel your breathing. You can feel that. So you just sense it. And the more you sense your body, like I said before, bringing your attention inwards instead of outwards automatically starts to calm down your body. It automatically does so. That's just the way your nervous system works. So just doing that alone will be helpful. As you start to just do that, and then you get the thought, the story keeps coming up. That a-hole, whatever it is that's going on, that's feeding the anger. So generally, if we didn't have this language capacity, which is so great and powerful, but it also has a side effect that it can keep creating stories, and this keeps energizing and prolonging the emotion unnecessarily. So if we learn to put our attention on the sensation and leave and decouple that from the story, the predictions, the interpretations we're making about these sensations, then these will go away because your thoughts need your attention to keep them alive. You're in the control right there. You come back and sense it, and then eventually, what happens with anything? Has anything in your life, ever in your life, lasted forever? Forever. Have you ever had a thought that never went away? Have you ever had a sensation in your body that stayed exactly the same from birth till now? Have you had anything in your life? Have you had your face, your body, buildings, anything in nature that you've seen? Has anything that you've ever experienced in your life ever stayed exactly the same in your life? No. I'm sorry? Breathing. Yes, so the breathing, but the way you breathe, does it not change? Does the rate change? Does it change where more in the chest or in the belly? So yes, because you have to be alive in order to, it will stop eventually, once your body stops. That will change too eventually. And it wasn't there before birth, but it is a constant, but it's constantly also dynamic as well. It's changing continuously. So, and that's, but it's a good point. I like that. So the thing is, everything is changing. So even your sensations are changing. So as you're watching that and you're no longer reacting, you're just becoming kind of like the witness of it. Then the energy has time to just process. It's not being fed by all the stories, and you're not acting it out by your impulses. And then eventually the body deems that this is not that important anymore, and it loses away. Because that's what emotions are. Emotions are triggered by when your body deems something important. But if you're just sitting there and sensing it, and you notice the sensations, you notice too that the sensations won't be quite as intense because they're amplified by when you're trying to get rid of the emotion. Try to get rid of emotion is a great way to suffer from it. But be with it. Not like dive in it, but just can I be okay with the sensations of it? And I generally, when people can decouple the story and feel it, and just the intensity, what's going on, is that worse than a migraine headache, what you're feeling here? Is that worse than a very bad stomach virus? And they're like, most people are like, no, actually. Oh, interesting. And then eventually you can start to process through. Wow. Okay. Evoking healthy emotional states. So one of the things is I want to, well, first of all, build interoception skills. So there are many ways we can do. We've done a couple. What we're doing with the hands and feet, we call that body scanning, sensing and feeling your body. So those 4 areas, feel free to practice those. You don't have to do a formal meditation and sit down. You be in the car. Put your attention on your hand. Sense your feet. When you're talking to somebody, sense your belly. Sense the base of your spine while you're practicing that. You can actually learn to do that. It will start to ground you. Just in the mirror. I've done that with some clients, and it can really have profound impacts. Evoking, and then other things like yoga, qigong, where you're doing slow movements and you're just paying attention to it. It immediately balances out the nervous system. So 2 of the ones that have become really popular in our society are gratitude and loving kindness. And we have scientific studies now showing the benefits of these positive emotions, is that you can practice positive emotions, which is kind of interesting. And so I say evoking healthy emotion, because what people try to do when they try to do these practices is they try to feel gratitude. They try to feel loving kindness. And generally, they can get a little bit, but it becomes frustrating. What the idea is to try to set up the environment to evoke it. Like a certain thought, a certain sound, certain environment, a smell, something. You set up your environment to make it easy for that emotion to express itself. So we'll try a little bit of a quick gratitude. We can't go into it. Can I go a little bit over, you think? Sort of, a little bit, tiny bit? I'll try to go like 5-10 minutes. You sure? Okay, cool. Okay. You sure? Okay. All right. As long as you guys are finding this helpful. Yes? Okay, great. So let's do a gratitude practice, because this is one of the easier ones that you can do, and I think it's one that has shown a lot of promise. So what I'd like you to do is very simple. Close your eyes and go over your day today in your mind and pick out certain parts of your day that were just certain positive aspects of your day. Even if you had an overall kind of crappy day, there were certain parts of it, I can guarantee you, that were pretty decent. Maybe it was a shower that you had that felt really nice. Perhaps it was breakfast or a lunch or just something that tasted good, or a conversation on the phone with someone that just went well, or maybe you played a game and in that game you did really well in the game and it just felt good, or you felt comfortable. Or you can even look at it beyond the kind of day-to-day, just having the ability to have hot water as opposed to what most of the world has. The ability to have clothes on your back, the ability to go to a store and buy food from all over the world at your fingertips. And just think of 3 things. Go through 1 and then 2 and 3. And just think of 3 things that you appreciate and felt gratitude for today. And just put the object there and don't try to feel gratitude. Just see if it opens up. It may or may not, and that's okay. The more you do this, it will naturally happen. But if we force it, it generally causes issues. Now, as you are doing this, because I have to talk, they've done 7 studies have done this, where they had people at the end of the night write down 3 things they're grateful for. In 21 days, they showed significant changes in well-being. They noticed improvements in sleep quality. They noticed they fell asleep quicker, slept better, felt better in the morning. They noticed they were more pro-social. They were more engaged and connected, and had better overall well-being. Writing down 3 things before they go to bed. That's it. That's all it took. So I generally do that. Either have people, if they're having sleeping problems, that's what I have them do. I'll have them have a sleeping journal, and I'll have them write down 3 things that they're grateful for. Or what I like to do is people who have they're a little more kind of sluggish in the morning. I have them go outside in the sunlight with as little clothing as possible. That's still not going to get them in trouble in the law. And be able to get as much of that gentle sun for 10 to 15 minutes and think about 3 things that they're grateful for then. Stack them so that you have healthy behaviors helping your brain out. So principle number 8, social relationships are essential for optimal brain and mind health. You know, our minds are not just inside our head. Our minds are all connected. See, right now, I'm inside your mind. You're hearing me. That's because your eyes are interpreting. You're listening to me. Your ears are. So I'm in your mind, and you're in mine. I can see you. I can hear you. I can do that. So our minds are actually interacting with each other. And when we're socially interacting, when we're talking, our brains, and they show this, it's awesome. When we're talking, you know when you're in a good conversation, who's had a pretty good conversation with a friend lately? Anybody recently? Okay. When you're doing that, usually when you're talking with a good friend, you get this nice, what we call, the turnkey, where one person talks, then the next person talks, and you kind of get into a nice rhythm. When it's a good conversation, it's not like one person's just dominating you, and you're just like, oh, jeez, I got to listen to this person the whole time. But it's like, it has a certain kind of synchrony that comes in there. Like, even though one may talk longer than the other, but there's a balance that's stronger. And you can feel it. There's almost like a feeling of connection in the body that starts to grow. That's why it feels good to talk to other people, have that continuous interaction. That's why socialization in real life always will out-trump social media, because you don't get that continuous interaction. The reading, most of the benefits that we're seeing from social interaction is from the nonverbal things, the holding of a hand, the eye gaze, the breathing connection that usually happens. Those kind of things generally help us out. So what we want to do in here when we do it is play more. How many people in the past month have played a game where they actually played and competed against somebody and played a game in the past month? Okay. Yeah. So what we know is that play is a requirement for mammals. In fact, one of the things that's really interesting is that one of the best forms of play when we're younger, and so one we were kind of told, not especially for men, was rough and tumble play. Rough and tumble play is one of the best. It lights up the brain better than any of the other types of play. So like wrestling and all that kind of stuff. It helps with our attention centers. It boosts our dopamine. And we find out, like when I have a client who has attention deficit, especially if they're hyperactive, I ask them how much do they play. And I generally will put them in something physical, something where they're using their body, and it's preferably if they do like wrestling or something like that. They have like a MMA, like mixed martial arts, or dancing where they're just moving their body in a coordinated way. But playing is extremely beneficial. So the fact that playing activates our attention centers really well. It's pro-social. It makes you smarter. I was going to go with another example, but I'm not going to go there because it'll take too long. But at the heart of this is, what's the strategy there? When you want to do things, when you want to add new habits, turn them into games. Turn them into games. Make it fun. If you're walking, well, how many times can I, do this? Can I make it in this time? Can I do it in this time? Can I do it in that? Just set little games for yourself, little bits of feedback. Make it a little bit fun. When you turn something into a game, it will activate your dopamine, which is your driving neurotransmitter. It drives you. It helps you seek what you want. So when we activate the play, when we're playing, think about all the other work that you do. But if you're playing, how much longer can you go? You can kind of go all the time. If you're having fun, it's just you can you'll sometimes overdo it actually, because you're not even paying attention to how much activity you're doing. And then we have the care circuitry, which in our brain is like nurturing. So it doesn't even have to just be people. You can care for plants. You can care for animals. And this is mediated by opioids, or natural endorphins, and oxytocin. And we also activate care through music as well. So just a couple interesting things. Quality over quantity. It's not how many likes you have or how many friends you have on this and that. It's really the high quality relationships. And you get greater psychological health, better happiness, intelligence improves. In fact, they had this, it's called the Harvard Happiness Study, and the one thing consistently predicted happiness, and that was the number of quality of connections in your life. Decrease the severity of illnesses, boost longevity. 20 years, 1984 to 2004, the number of people who don't have one person to talk to about important matters tripled. It's actually raised now. I think it's now almost close to a third. I said that the number of people who have no one to talk to in regards to something meaningful and important tripled during this time period of 20 years to 25%. Now 1 in 4, and now they're saying it may be up to 1 in 3. It's been growing. This is like the loneliness epidemic. They like to say epidemic about everything, but it is a problem. It is a problem, and it's causing a lot of issues. And addiction is probably one of the big reasons. I think the opiate addiction is partially, if not majorly, linked to our loneliness and disconnection. Because opiates are pro-social at low doses. So we seek them out artificially because we're not getting it naturally. So friendships, get back in contact. So there are different things. You can go to meetup groups, write up things that you used to be interested in, things that you enjoy, and just try them out. Try something that you used to be good at. And my parents were, like my father's roughly around 77. My mom is like 68. And they really didn't do it. I kept stressing, listen, and I can sense that their brains were just not as sharp because they become more and more isolated as you get older. Finally, they moved into this really nice retirement community, had all these activities. And I can't tell you the difference on their mood, on their ability to converse with me. My dad particularly. It's impressive. Just by enhancement of the social interaction. Now that they're doing more things, they go to more functions, they have people to go to dinner with. It's really tremendous what you see. Now, I wanted to do something with synchrony and music to feel connected, but we don't have enough time for that. But really the key is that you can use music and synchrony to get yourself together. So if you want to make your family unit a little bit better, I know this may sound a little bit loud, but if you pick a song, and I was playing, the song We Will Rock You, right? It has a good, strong rhythm. And what I was going to do is play it all here and have us all go, doom, doom, ch, doom, doom, ch. And you do that, and you can see, and I've done this many times, and in 2 minutes of that, and you will feel great. You'll feel your energy will rise, especially if you look around and you're doing it and seeing other people doing it. It's the social connectivity that's built in our brain for survival, because when we were in tribes, when we were doing the same thing, when we were in soldiers, and why they all do all this kind of stuff together, because it syncs our minds together. We feel greater than ourselves, and we're connected. We feel more secure. We feel more alive. We're more willing to do creative things because we're connected. So you can actually, I hate the when they use this word, but hack it in the sense of by doing synchronous movements. So if you were to want to get closer to someone you love or anything, maybe you have a family, and so each of you pick a song once a week and just start off once a week, where the two of you will just like rhythm to the music together. And I like to hear what happens afterwards, because I've had these people do that, and they feel closer. They still may be arguing about other things, but they feel a little closer in that moment. And it helps them to sync up their minds a little better, to get to be able to communicate more effectively. So they even did one study where people just tapped their fingers, and they had them tap the fingers in rhythm, and other people out of rhythm. And people were more helpful to those. They didn't know anything else about them. They were more helpful to when people tapped their finger in rhythm. That was the only difference. They were more helpful than the ones that tapped out of rhythm. That's how important getting in sync is. And I wanted to read this quote because it's so important. One thing research shows is that as one social network gets smaller, one's risk for mortality increases. And it's a strong correlation, almost as strong as the correlation between smoking and mortality. This is one of the big researches in social. Very close. And another gentleman, Dean Ornish, also very much echoed that sentiment. Just like cigarette smoke. Impressive. So lastly, and we're acting here, create a personal program that stacks multiple mind health strategies. Basically, you commit to something with consistent action. Don't worry if you don't do it perfectly. Don't worry if you forget a day. It's not whether you do it perfectly or forget a day. It's you learn is, all right, what I skipped that day, just get right back on. And if there's a pattern, what's the pattern? What's going on here? The other last thing I just want to, when you add on a new healthy habit, I just want to give one last story really quickly, and then we'll call this, and then I'll go through the quick slide here, and then I'll open up the questions. One of the things I recommend my clients a lot is to go outside within the first 3 hours of your day and get as much sun as you want. Don't put the sunblock on yet. Get about 10 to 15 minutes of sun without sunglasses. There's a lot of benefits to that. It's not going to cause any kind of problems or anything unless you have some predisposing medical problems that I'm not aware of. Then ask your doctor. But that's not going to cause the skin issues. That's all when prolonged exposure. It'll help your brain function better. You'll think better. Your brain will stimulate neuroplasticity. It boosts your mood. It gets your circadian rhythms in order, which gets all your hormones. If you do that consistently, then all your hormones, your testosterone, cortisol, all of them go in nice in order. It's like a nice symphony in concordance with one another. You'll feel better. You'll sleep better. So that's why it's an easy thing to do. Just go outside. If you go for a walk, maybe pair it with gratitude. So I used to do this. I would do that, and I felt great. I would go out there and I'd literally take my phone and I'd put the timer on and I'd put out my 15 minutes and I'd sit there and I'd be like, oh yeah, and I'm looking and I'm checking the thing and I'm looking, and all right, great, I'm done. And I'd go out and I'd feel good. I got better. I got great results. I felt better, but I'd always stop, even with all the good results. I'm like, well, what's going on here? Again, asking help, like, what's going on here? I didn't say, oh, I'm weak-willed or I can't do this, and here I am. I'm a hypocrite. I'm telling my patients to do it. I'm not doing it myself. And I asked myself the question, what's going on here? How can I do this differently where I look time? And the issue is that in the moment of the behavior, I wasn't in the moment. I kept on looking. What's the time? I wasn't actually enjoying the sun on me. What it feels like, the vitality that it brings in, the warmth, the nice warmth, the feeling, the time, adding in maybe a gratitude practice where you're associating other positive feelings with what's going on. I was solely focused on the end result. If you focus just on the end result, you're likely, then you need to use willpower every time to keep doing it, and you're only focused on the result. The chances are that's not going to stick. But if you learn to actually somehow appreciate it, even at first, if you don't, you just ask, how can I appreciate this behavior in the moment? And then just let that draw your attention in. Final slide, folks. Where do I begin? So pick two of these. If any of these call to you, create a morning and nighttime ritual. We need to create rituals in our day. There's so much uncertainty. Our life is faster than ever before. We're overly stimulated. So you like to gradually get into your stimulation and then eventually de-stimulate yourself. Ideally about an hour before sleep. Go outside, go for a walk 10 to 15 minutes each morning and focus on gratitude or loving kindness. We didn't have much time to go into that. Eat a healthy breakfast. Hey, if you're not going to eat healthy throughout the day, just start your day off well. What I try to do is let's start with a healthy breakfast and see how we go from there. You can eat crap the rest of the day. Then I want you to eat a healthy breakfast and lunch. And just see how that goes. What happens, if I can get people to eat healthy breakfast and lunch consistently, they'll start to notice, it takes a little longer because we're doing the slow Band-Aid approach rather than the full rip-off quickly. But what they'll start to notice with time is that they'll feel pretty good after a month of doing that during the day. And then when they eat their dinner and eat all their dessert, they're all out. So then now experientially, they're starting to notice what harmful food does to their body. And that will help them, some of them, to be able to change fully. We went over some healthy supplements. That was in the last lecture. Some fish oils. Most of us are deficient in the essential fatty acids, B complex, magnesium, and zinc. Make your bedroom as comfortable as possible for high quality sleep. Take your money away from your cable. Take your money if you have to. Buy a bed that when you lay in it, you're like, I really love this bed. It's so comfortable. When you go to certain hotels and you just know and you just sleep so well. And that's where you want to invest in. You want to sleep well. You'll be more productive. You'll be happier. You'll be better, have better relationships. It's that important. I call it feng shui your senses. We have all these senses at our disposal. We have all this great technology to give them all these wonderful things, but we generally don't. And that is for your ears. You can set up we have access to 1 million songs? You can create a playlist. Create a morning playlist, a nighttime playlist, an inspiration playlist. Create happy songs, inspiration songs, anything that nourishes your heart. You can do that. You can do that with YouTube. It's free. You can do things that stimulate your. They have now cameras that are in certain very tropical places, and you can live, where you can watch the waterfalls in certain locations live, and you can just go to these beautiful places all around the world that we have access to, and you can watch it before you go to bed. Stimulating your eyes, or wearing things that are comfortable when you get home from work so that you're comfortable. So we're using your 5 senses and really nourishing them. Exercise. What I'd like to do, move to 2 songs a day. Pick 2 songs a day and move to them. If you need to close your shades, fine. If you get embarrassed, great. You're improving the circulation in your face. It's good stuff. It's okay. it helps. If you add that together, just rather than moving, you'll notice there's a lot of benefits with the rhythm. It stimulates certain parts of your brain. It goes back and forth, so that your thinking gets better. The way to think of interesting, creative thoughts gets better. Get connected, people, plants, nature, volunteer, values, ideas, science, religion, whatever calls to you. Connect. It's something beyond your personal self. When we're lonely, we just remember that default mode. We're going to think about ourselves all the time. And it's that negativity bias that's going to come in. But when we get and we expand ourselves, we connect, we actually connect to other people's minds, then our self doesn't seem like this part. It doesn't even become part of the equation anymore. And we feel free. And then spend some time, 3 to 20 minutes a day in meditation 6 times a week. 3 minutes a day. If you could do 3 minutes a day, driving from work, before you get in, when you get home from work, when you first start your day, or when you get home from sleep, you just do 3 minutes a day, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Pay attention to your breath, or just do something. Basically, the essence of meditation is having your attention be on direct experience without language. That's it. Just how to pay attention to your experience without language dominating it. Don't worry if your mind still keeps talking to you. That's okay. You just let that kind of be like a background radio. And you just keep your attention into the sounds that are naturally coming in, the sights that you see, the sense, what you're feeling in your arms, all what you're actually non-verbally experiencing. Do that for 3 minutes or more a day, and that will have tremendous benefit. That's the essence. And I think... And I just left up a couple healthy breakfast kind of formula if anybody's interested. Green Power Smoothie that I generally recommend for most of my clients that I send out to. And I will leave it open for questions for anybody. Yeah, so I do a 90-minute intake in the initial, and on that 90-minute intake, I have to assess, because I can't give all of it. It would be overwhelming for anybody. It would be overwhelming even if I was coming in there at the first time. So I have to make an assessment where they're at, what they're willing to do, and then at that point, I will, but everybody at the end of the first session, they get sent an 8-page document that I created. It's kind of like a summary of the best nutritional strategies, lists like certain food groups that we know with a slant towards building a stronger brain. For instance, like the green vegetables, the cruciferous vegetables that we now know improve brain function and liver function. We know now that the 3 power fruits, berries, cherries, and pomegranate seeds, those 3 in particular, have very, very distinct benefits for the brain. So I give that. And then they have, and because sleep is so foundational, about 90 to 95% of all mental disorders are preceded by dysregulated sleep. Meaning that before they actually had a full-blown whatever, depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, or any of that stuff, it was generally preceded by their sleep was getting dysregulated before they actually went into a full-blown disorder. So when I get someone who can sleep without medication, but with supplements, and I know our momentum is really building in the positive direction. So they get that. And then we usually do some blood lab work because I want to look at to see if there's any nutritional deficiencies because most people in the United States don't eat very well. And then I generally assess where they're at nutritionally by, part of my intake will